it's Jeanette here from my home studio, Far Forest Ceramics. After a lot of people contacted me saying, how do you make so many mystery glaze chips? I'm trying to put together a little bit of a tutorial. There's very many stages to it, so let me see what I can show you. So you can see here, I'm glazing on top of a piece of plastic. This is actually draw liner that I got online, just textured, cut up into squares, and you'll see how I use that later on. But it collects the glaze strips. I also have a jar of clean water that I start off with, and every time I use a glaze and I've finished, I use a sponge and I clean down the lid and the sides to collect any surplus glaze that's, I don't like a messy pot, I like a clean studio. But this sponge I will wash in this jug of water. Any time I sponge at all, it's always washed in this jug of water. I then use yogurt pots because they're bendable, and I wash my brushes in these yogurt pots as I'm doing a glaze session. I'll actually have 3 or 4 on the go at once, so any dark coloured glazes, I'm talking about the colour before it's fired, I'll have in one pot, lighter in another, like red ones in another. It just helps define the chips slightly differently. So these are to the right, my tubs of yogurt pots full of brush washing water. You can see I've got different shades of them. The left is a jug that I have been washing my sponge in as I cleaned my glaze tubs after I've used them. So what you can see me doing here is I'm using a syringe to remove the water from the top. I'm trying not to get the nozzle to touch the residue at the bottom. So all the glaze residue has been, over those 3-4 days, been sinking to the bottom, and the water's been clearing on the top. What I'm trying to do is, I've left a little sponge in the bottom of that one. You find all sorts in the bottom of your pots. So I'm trying to remove the surplus water from all of these containers without disturbing the residue on the bottom. I could have left these for a week or 2 weeks and you'll find the water's even clearer on the top, but I tend to be a bit impatient, and I've got so many mystery glaze chips, I'm just impatient. But the one to the left is in a jug that is not flexible, and that's not going to be possible for me to collect chips in that. So it's the water I wash my sponges with. So I will come back and I'll make that into chips as well, but you'll see that I'm siphoning off as much water as possible. But this red one, I'm getting a bit bored. I'm picking up the bottom residue. So what I want to try and do instead is find another way, save having to siphon right down to the very bottom. So the jug on the left, the sponge washing water, I'll get as much water out as possible, and then I'm going to get a brush and mix that up so it's not all stuck to the bottom, because I'm going to decant that later into another yogurt pot. Then I'll take the surplus residue off these pots, and you can see it still leaves a great deal of the glaze residue at the bottom. I then mix that jug up and I pour it into a clean yogurt pot, and that now I'll put to one side for 2 or 3 days and do exactly the same thing. So I've got 4 pots now with a glaze residue in the bottom in flexible pots. Hope that makes sense. I've also got jars when I finished a glaze pot that I'll try and collect some chips from that. So this is a Goodhoven pot from Mako. I remove my indicator tiles because I like to reuse these pots afterwards. They're very, very useful for storage, especially mystery chips because they're quite airtight. So depending on how much you empty your glaze pot when you're glazing, mine are quite clean on the side and the bottom, but on the rim there's lots of chunky bits, lovely chunky bits. So get a piece of paper, just using a wooden, actually I think it's a kebab skewer, just run it round the grooves, and you'll find by doing this you can get quite a lot of nice chunks off the glaze that's on the inside and the outside of the rim. Like I say, when I look inside these pots you can see the walls and the base has not got an awful lot on, so they're quite hard for me to chip off. I will note I'm also wearing a mask when I'm working with this dry glaze, always safety. Removing this all as much as I can, but I'm not going to be too precious. This takes a long time to do, so I'll get as much as I can of the chunky bits, and then I have a plan of how I'm going to get the remaining glaze from these jars and recycle it. So This is Cordovan on its own, and I like to create chips in their own individual colour as well. So because this has come just from one pot, I know it's only Cordovan. I store that in a little tiny container marked Cordovan, and then I've got a pot of not mystery chips but Cordovan chips. I'll also make them individually myself, but I also collect them in this way when I'm cleaning a glaze tub jar. I'll now continue to try and do the other one, but because there's not much on it, I need to find a different way to recover the remaining glaze that's in these pots. So now I'm going to get a bowl of water, clean water in a washing up bowl. I've done a few already, and I'm going to wash my glaze pots. Now it might seem a little bit odd, but this water in this bowl, I'm going to recycle that as well. It's only water and glaze. So I'll use a sponge, and I'll really work hard to get every last bit of glaze into this water. That might seem a little bit excessive, but to be honest, I love using these pots for storing so many things. So I want to clean this pot. I want it clean to be able to use it for other things. I may as well clean it in some water in a bowl and recycle that bowl as well, because there is a lot of glaze residue that's going to be in the bottom of that washing up bowl. I've got another process of how I recycle this glaze that I'm going to show you, so you can use whatever technique you feel in the mood for or what suits your processes the best. But after I've got all of the glaze from the inside, I'll then remove the label, so I've got a nice clean surface for me to, I can actually write on the outside of that the back of the label with a marker pen, so it's nice and clean, and I won't put that now back in that bright red water. So next up is recovering any glaze from the drawer liners that I sat my pieces on when I was glazing. You can see I just literally, when they're dry, roll them up, give them a good squeeze, and there's quite a bit that tends to come off. You can see there in the paper, nice small, and these are actually like little circular chips. So it's nice to get different shapes of chips as well in your pot. I'll then store these in my recycled glaze jar. You can see here, this is about, 3 months worth of collection, so you can collect a lot. It's great to think that you're recycling your glaze as well with its, it's not cheap, is it? So do you remember those squares of drawer liner that I used to glaze on? And then I've rolled them up to get any, residue in small little dots that I've recycled. Now I need to clean them in readiness for when I use them next time. So I use this same water that I've used to wash the jars, wash my sponges, and I just give them a really good wash, because this water I'm going to recycle and try and get some chips from the residue at the bottom. So I will, when I finally finish doing my full wash up and dry up, I will let this bowl sit for a good 3 days. Then I'll siphon off the top, and then when I get down just to a slurry at the bottom, because this bowl isn't flexible, I will then use that with a different technique in glazing, which is by brushing it on some clear acetate sheets. I'll show you them when they're dry just now. Oh, lovely and clean, ready for the next glaze session. Love it. Okay, we're going to now just complete the chips. So these are the 4 pots that I had the water that I was washing my brushes in. I've siphoned off the top, I've left them for a week to dry, and they're now nice and bone dry. These are yoghurt containers, so they're very flexible. So what I'll just basically do, very, very simple, I will just get some paper, put a crease in it, and I will then take the yoghurt pot, and hopefully you can see this. Isn't that a satisfying sound? I love this part. You can see just how flexible these yoghurt pots are, so you can really scrunch them. At the end of the day, if one splits or breaks, which it hasn't actually yet, I've used them over and over again, you just get another yoghurt pot, recycle it. But they really scrunch up wonderfully so that you can get that residue into some chips. You can get big ones, small ones, all different sizes. See this one, this is the residue from that washing up bowl. It was a lot thicker, the residue. So now I've got some chunkier chips. This is a very thin base, but again, you still get the light chips from that. So I love having all the different thicknesses, the sizes, and it's just amazing just how much you can recover. Even that last little bit there, I'll take a skewer and just scrape it off, because it all adds, even the dust creates a nice effect as well, but all in one pot. Look at that. I have an old Mako pot that I'm collecting my chips in. Quite a lot, as you can see. And then just a case of simply adding it to the pot. Now I also then had some pots that I washed, Mako, some glaze pots that were finished, that after I'd got all the chunks out, I washed all the pots out. So the washing water, which I'd just been washing glaze pots, and then I'll wash these, I then let that sit, drain that off, and I've got a residue that I just painted onto, they're like acetate sheets. These used to be stationary wallets that you could open up to put paper inside. So I just poured the remnants onto there and then brushed it on with a brush. And then what I will do now on these is literally, because they're flexible, I'm going to just roll it up nice and carefully. It's so flexible, and I should have, to be honest, really done, instead of 2 sheets, I should have done 1 sheet and done a second coat to make it a little bit thicker. So this is quite thin. You'll see that when I actually sort of like press and squeeze the coiled up piece of acetate, I get light flakes coming off. However, you'll then see on the surface that we've got an awful lot of fine glaze flakes rather than chips, some nice bigger pieces, which will create a lovely effect. Now, it's very important to remember that whenever you're working with dry glaze, always wear your respiratory mask. What I've decided to do here is I've just taken a metal rib and I'm lightly lifting up the flakes, and you can see it's making some beautiful big flakes there. Where I make glaze chips in an individual colour, when I say I make them myself in another process, I use this same acetate sheet. I basically have 1 acetate sheet for each colour, and you can see that one there, it says actually Capri Blue on it, I think, in the corner, but I used it for this remnant. I'll tend to lightly sand the surface of the plastic, because otherwise sometimes the glaze can pool, and then I'd literally brush 3 coats of a glaze, letting it dry in between each coat, on one of these sheets of acetate, and do exactly like I'm doing now, rolling it up, crunching it, and the flakes will all come off. Store them in individual containers. So you can see just how much has been collected, and that was from the washing up water. Look at all of this that goes in from that washing up water. It's a lot. Look at all those big flakes as well. Well worth keeping your washing up water. So there we go. That is it. Literally mystery chips made in various different ways. Hope you find this helpful. Would love to hear how you get on and see any of your results. But yeah, enjoy. Mystery chips. Here's a piece I made earlier so you can see the sort of effect that I've been getting with mystery chips with a vertical application. Absolutely love this. So take care. Goodbye from me. See you soon. Bye.